Okay, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. This is the Elected Official Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, September 14th. It's a really big meeting, so thanks for joining us. We're talking about some gigantic topics tonight. Really excited about this. But first, I just want to thank Dan Blankenship. Dan, I thought today's raft retreat was outstanding. It was substantial. It was really well organized. We covered really important topics. I want to thank you and the staff and the subcommittee who put it together. So thank you. I thought it was great. And the only thing better than starting the morning with the rafter retreat is ending the day with an EOTC meeting. So 7 hours, 7 hours of transit talk is good.
You cut out early.
And I left, right. I only put 4 hours. George put 5 in. We're going to start with, John, we're going to start with, we need to review the decisions reached at the June 15th meeting.
Correct.
What do we need, a vote?
No. Just a review.
You want to take us through?
I'll just do a brief recap.
Okay.
And for those of you who are at both meetings, there is some coffee and cookies back there. If you need to refuel carbo load, they're back there for you. So yeah, the last meeting was June 15th at Snowmass. We did confirm that there is another EOTC meeting on October 19th that Pickens County will chair and host in this room. The agenda for that will be the 2018 budget. And at the June meeting, Tom Oken talked about the state of the budget so far for 2017. Sales and use taxes were better than expected, a little over budget. Expenditures were slightly under budget, so that's all good news. And then the next topic was the battery electric bus program. There was a funding request for $500,000 toward the program, which should be part of the funding contingent on the federal LONO grant being awarded to RAFTA for that. That was unanimously approved, that funding request. Then we talked about an Upper Valley travel patterns study that was going to have multiple funding partners that would look at travel patterns versus transit patterns, or transit ridership and patterns. Those the AirStage cell phone data was used in the Upper Valley Mobility Study and RAFTA's ITSP. That was turned down by the EOTC, so that did not go forward. The Upper Valley Mobility Study, Ralph Trapani and Parsons presented their wrap-up of the Upper Valley Mobility Study at that meeting, and staff asked that if the EOTC to consider having a stage 2 proposal from Parsons to continue Parsons on as a consultant in case there are other issues and items to talk about. But there wasn't any support for that. The EOTC did ask Ralph to come to the meeting. He's here tonight if there's questions. There was an update on the Grand Avenue Bridge closure and the RAFTA transit mitigation plan for that closure. Kathleen W. How do you, anybody know?
We got it, John.
Yeah, she was there. She's the public information for the project. She gave a great update on the closure, the detours, and everything that was in place. And Dan talked about the RAFTA mitigation plan, and there is an update in today's meeting as well. The next item was the estimated cost for the increased service in the Brush Creek corridor. And that was discussed. Snowmass was looking or is looking for increased service during the spring, summer, and fall from half hour to 15 minutes so that the service to and from Snowmass up and down the Brush Creek corridor would sync up with the BRT service out of the Brush Creek Park and Ride a lot so that nobody would have to wait. That's also on the agenda again today. RAFTA estimated that cost of that additional service at about $294,000. There are also some updates. Talked about the Basalt Underpass, which is on schedule and now is about 90% open or complete. Rachel talked about the Colorado Initiative 21, and we talked about having the Aspen Institute Mobility Lab at this meeting, which they're both here tonight. And that was the June 15th meeting, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks, John. John, we're good. We're going to go right to public comment now. unless there are comments on John's. Okay, let's go right to public comment. I'd like to open the floor for public comment, and this is a time for you to comment on anything you'd like that's not on tonight's kind of public hearing schedule. Just hold your comments to 3 minutes, if you would. Mike, are you here for Tony Kronberg?
Mayor, I would say that I'm interested in hearing what's being said. I might have to comment, but,
Okay.
I'm just not here to, make stuff up here.
It is a city council chamber, so, okay. Tony.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, my name is Tony Krumberg, and I'd like to thank the elected officials Transportation Committee very much for this meeting. This has been a long process, and I believe that this has probably been the culmination of almost 10 to 15 years of work that's going to be presented tonight, even though a lot of the committees have only worked on their issues for a year and a half. I have a request that I would like to ask of all the elected officials, and that is before your next meeting on October 19th, that you do a site visit at Brush Creek Park and Ride. The reason being is that years ago, when we were bringing forward the no fare transit, there was a little emphasis on trying to make the Brush Creek Intercept Park and Ride as the entrance to both Snowmass and Aspen. And you would be shocked at how many people actually use the Brush Creek Intercept lot, not only for parking, but for exercising, walking their dogs, taking views, cleaning out their vehicles when they're tourists or whatnot. And because Snowmass is going to be asking for funding tonight for the increased bus transit, and then Aspen with the mobility lab, that I think it would be in the best interest if everyone takes the bus out there to see what you're asking the community and tourists to do. Take the bus from Aspen, Snowmass, Picken County, have a site visit there, get back on the bus, and come back in. But it is really a very beautiful view. It's a beautiful view at the entrances to connecting both Aspen and Snowmass.
Thank you, Tony.
With that being said, thank you.
Good. Thanks. Additional public comments? Please.
I'd like to talk, but probably after the mobility report is presented.
You want to say, okay, sure.
Would that
That's
be
fine, that's fine,
appropriate?
sure. Additional comments? Okay, great. Let's move on the schedule. We're going to get right to the Upper Valley Mobility Report. And a big thank you. This is a year and a half in the making. This is the culmination of a community conversation we've been having. And a big thank you to Crystal and the Institute for helping facilitate this. And a huge thank you to Bill Kane and John Bennett for chairing the committee, and all 30 members of the community who sat around the table for a year and a half to drive a conversation. I'm looking forward to this. So, John Bennett.
Great. Thank
Crystal.
you. I'm Crystal Logan, Vice President Aspen of the Aspen Institute, and I'm delighted to kick off this presentation of the Upper Valley Mobility Report, which is the project of the Aspen Institute's Community Forum Task Force on Transportation and Mobility. I'm joined by members of our executive committee, John Bennett and Bill Kane, who are the co-chairs of this project, Michael Kinsley, who did research and facilitation for us, and John Sarpa. He's out of town, so he couldn't be with us tonight. This team, along with our task force members, many of whom are here with us tonight, did a tremendous amount of work on behalf of this community, and for that we're sincerely grateful. This process began when the Aspen Institute was asked if we could apply our methodologies to issues facing Aspen and the Roaring Fork Valley, specifically transportation and mobility. We decided that the best use of this process would be to develop an overall vision of where we'd like to be in 20 years from the standpoint of transportation and mobility. And it was very important to us at the outset to focus on quality of life, environmental sustainability, air quality, and social equity. So to that end, we were very deliberately focused on high-level visionary policy-oriented discussions, and we were not debating the technical specifics of executing various plans. So after several discussions with community members, we decided that we would host a series of public talks featuring experts on the issues of traffic and transportation and mobility. And the idea was to feature speakers who would disrupt the thinking and the status quo and get the community thinking about the ideas and solutions that are working in other cities, but also ideas that might be difficult for us to hear. So to work in tandem with these public talks, we formed this task force made up of community members who would meet with these experts to see what ideas and what solutions we could apply to the upper Roaring Fork Valley. So we set out to use the Aspen Institute's policy program method, which brings together about 25 to 30 leaders representing various viewpoints to convene in a safe, off-the-record, neutral environment to discuss solutions that could improve the lives of those living and visiting the Roaring Fork Valley. The task force members live in neighborhoods from Aspen to Newcastle, and the outcome of this project would be a set of recommendations that would be presented to the community and to the elected officials at the end of this process. So that brings us here with you today. We have the task force recommendations are in this report, and we've given you all bound copies of the report, and it was all in your packets. So with that, I turn things over to Bill and John. Thank you.
Before John starts, I think we just wanted to take a sec and acknowledge the forum members that are actually here today. So you'll recognize some, or a good number of staff people. But I think we'd also, in addition to acknowledging, I think we'd like to also offer special thanks. We really had a unique opportunity. We had almost 100% attendance over 15 months. That in itself is pretty remarkable. But I'm sure I'll miss someone. But today we have with us, who were terrific participants in the process, Ralph Trapani, Dave Peckler, Dan Blankenship, Nina Eisenstadt, Katie Viola, Michael Kinsley, Barry Crook, John Kruger, Michael Miracle, he did walk in, there he is, and Ward Howenstein. And we're absolutely certain that it was Ward's participation on the forum that led to his political successes. John Peacock snuck in the room there. He's over there. John set us straight more than once. Mirta Mowry came in the back. She's hiding in the back. Terrific. Pam Alexander. And I think we would like to extend a special thanks to the elected officials that worked with us, Steve and George and Marky, who've had lots of other competing demands for their time, gave generously, and were wonderful participants, and really helped us make the process what it was. And we'd really like to extend a personal thanks to those three individuals who really provided some leadership.
Thanks, Bill.
Leadership in the form of nightsticks over the head occasionally, but they were really good. So John has got I think a wonderful kind of summary of our efforts, and he's going to take it from here.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill, and thanks everybody. And I promise this is short. So we've been debating transportation and sitting in traffic jams for a very long time as a community. The first election on the entrance to Aspen was in 1970. For the record, the county voted in favor of a 4-lane and the city voted against it. And some form of that public debate has existed ever since. As I look at these old photos, I'm struck by the surprising number of people who now seem to accept traffic jams as inevitable, simply something we'll live with forever. And that begs the question, after so many decades, do we actually still need to care about automobile congestion? Well, we think the answer is yes. Traffic jams are a terrible way to present our community to the world. They hurt our businesses, which have to find employees willing to sit in them. They aggravate our visitors. They add noise, pollution, and carbon to our downtown. And they make us waste millions of hours every year, time that we could spend with families, on the job, or enjoying our mountains. Whether you're looking at the issue as a resident, a commuter, a visitor, or a business owner, daily traffic jams diminish our community. And things won't get better on their own. According to the State Demographer's Office, we will have a lot more people in our valley by 2035, and that equates to many thousands of new trips up and down our valley every day. It's a truly complex problem. If an easy answer existed, you would have implemented it long ago. We've had some great successes, such as RAFTA growing to over 5 million passengers a year. That's extraordinary. but even that hasn't reduced our traffic jams. So in June 2016, the Aspen Institute convened 31 Valley residents to take a fresh look at Upper Valley transportation and mobility issues. It was a chance to think anew about the challenges and also the potential solutions, some of which are just arising now in the world of technology. As we listened to the national transportation experts that the Aspen Institute brought here, one of the biggest things that struck many of us on the task force was the reality of induced traffic. Basically, induced traffic means that adding highway capacity in growing areas doesn't work because wider highways create enough new traffic to keep congestion at constant levels. We've seen this even here in our valley. Look at El Jebel or Glenwood Springs. Basically, induced traffic works in two ways. First, when a highway is widened, people will use it more often, shift their travel back to peak hours, or change from transit to driving. The second way induced traffic works is through land use effects. A perceived shorter commute time to work or recreation spurs commercial and residential real estate development that quickly refills the highway. Again, think Willits and El Jebel. The aha moment for many of us on the Community Forum Task Force was the realization that transit is subject to the same law of induced demand, induced traffic as highways. Our national transportation experts made it clear. This doesn't mean that public transit isn't important. It's extremely important, but simply that it's not enough. And this principle begins to explain why RAFTA could double its ridership and then double it again, while traffic congestion has remained largely unchanged. Public transit is absolutely essential to curing traffic congestion, but by itself, it's insufficient. To reduce congestion, transit has to be part of a larger mobility system. Solving congestion requires a balance of both incentives and disincentives. We have to create a variety of really great mobility options, including world-class public transit, but we also need congestion reduction measures like dynamic road pricing and parking pricing to overcome the challenge of induced traffic. So what the task force came up with is a balanced approach that we call the integrated mobility system. And we believe that this could actually work in our Upper Valley. It could, in fact, reduce or even eliminate our traffic jams. The system has 5 component parts. Starting at the top of the slide, enhanced bus rapid transit can carry the extra passengers we expect to need when this system is implemented. Quiet electric buses can be phased in and fares can be lowered or even eliminated with revenues generated by other parts of this system. Going clockwise, ride sharing can range from a high-tech peer-to-peer app-based system that matches drivers with riders on Highway 82 to low-tech casual carpooling system that we see working in other regions of the country. Ride sharing makes more efficient use of the thousands of vehicles already traveling our roads, and of course we don't mean simply hitchhiking. Congestion reduction measures include dynamic road and parking pricing. Fees would vary with congestion levels and time of day. To avoid a road fee, a driver could offer ride sharing to someone who needs a ride, carpool with someone else, use RAFTA, or qualify for an exemption, such as an essential worker. Road fees would be revenue neutral, with all funds being used to support other mobility options, such as lowering or even eliminating many RAFTA fares. HOV lane enforcement would increase carpooling and allow more efficient RAFTA bus operations. Ride hailing, the last of the 5, includes app-based on-demand services like Uber and Lyft that provide first and last mile transportation solutions. The cost could be bundled with a RAFTA bus ticket so that only one click is needed to travel seamlessly. The individual parts of this system are interdependent. Some specifically reduce traffic congestion, others increase mobility for the public. Some are capital and cost intensive, while others would contribute revenue, making the system more affordable. They depend on each other to work. The Community Forum's vision is this system of mobility. It contains both carrots and sticks. It employs cutting-edge technology. It reflects our values as a community, and it can work for everyone, commuters, residents, and visitors. Put another way, this system will reduce the Highway 82 misery index, which has been way too high for far too long. If we implement this system, we think will fundamentally change Upper Valley transportation. We'll have fewer traffic jams, which will benefit all of us. Commuters will get to work on time and home to their families at the end of the day. Businesses will hire employees more easily. Visitors will get to enjoy the recreation they came here for, and residents will be able to live their lives free from today's traffic, noise, and pollution. Ultimately, this is about improving the quality of life that we all experience and that makes our valley so special. Thank you, and I'm now going to turn this over to Bill Kane, who will talk briefly about the task force's process and what we see as next steps.
Thanks, John. I think that perhaps one of the most enduring things we could leave you with is the assessment of what we consider to be realistic transportation options compared against core community values. So in that effort, and this is a matrix, I'm reminded that a planner without a matrix is like a fly without ointment, I think. But this matrix actually embodies a lot of thought and work. So what we strove to do, and I'll read from my text, our goal was to evaluate 12 transportation options and evaluate them against 9 core values that were developed by the task force members. The values as displayed range from core community values like community character and environmental quality, which are a bit amorphous, to the other end of the spectrum, which were kind of minimal system requirements that include things like financial viability and safety and capacity of the system, and then a whole array of other service features in between. In order to gain a clear sense of the group preference, we configured a matrix and scoring system. We used a questionnaire for each of our members to identify priorities for the group. In this manner, we feel that we generated a statistically valid measure of the group's preferences. So if you begin with a group of 31 individuals who represent a statistically valid cross-section of the community, which we believe we did, and then assess them in a rigorous manner, which we think we did, we think that the priorities that were established in the integrated mobility system represent a pretty fair reflection of community value. We think that in order to make this a successful and achievable program, that a few things are required. We believe it would be critical to identify a single entity which will be charged with the responsibility to model and evaluate each one of these program recommendations. We think that these recommended options are regional in scope, will cross jurisdictional lines, so it doesn't really work to identify either Aspen, Pitkin County, or Town of Snowmass Village as an individual entity to carry this forward. This is really an EOTC effort, and we think it would be it would really be enormously helpful to have a single entity reporting to this committee to see through the implementation of these ideas. So that we recommend to simply start as a single staff person who may draw upon the resources of Snowmass Village, Aspen, and Pitkin County, but will essentially be a new person with focused responsibilities for the timely implementation of the recommended system. Our concluding slide's a little nostalgic. We hope that the thumbing station signs were saved. We now refer to this as casual carpooling in our recommendations. But that kind of concludes. That's a very brief summary of 15 months of work, and we really look forward to questions and discussion.
Great, thanks. Bill, would you go back one slide to the next steps? But what does this look like? What's the suggested direction should these be adopted?
And we'll probably chip in on this, but I think we have lots of ideas here. As we've arrayed, the mobility system contains 5 or 6 different individual components. We think it'll be critical to actually model these ideas before you launch an implementation. We think it'd be really worthwhile to model the ride-sharing program, for example. We did not find a direct comparable out there in the world that we could plug and play and incorporate into the Upper Roaring Fork Valley. And we interviewed Lyft and talked to Uber, and I think we had a pretty good kind of exposure to programs that are there. We think we're probably a bit of a unique animal, considering the central corridor, the linear configuration of the valley, and kind of the peak hour and demand characteristics. So we think each one of these should be first modeled so that we understand what the upside and downside of each of these are. They should be evaluated before we actually adopt an implementation program. So what it looks like is that, as we thought, perhaps one staff person that could draw upon John Kruger and Dave Peckler and Blankenship and the entire staff, but they would be staff to EOTC and report to you guys directly, and be responsible for a calendar, a schedule, deadlines, implementation, and really evaluate the ins and outs of these. So,
good.
John, do you want to?
No, I think that's accurate. As you know, we consciously stayed we try to stay at a visionary level. In fact, we got a heck of a lot more specific than most of us expected at the end of this. Even so, for every idea in here, there are 500 questions and 500 issues that have to be thought through carefully, and everything you do in one part of this system affects the other parts. So it's complex, and it will take some careful thought. And it was suggested by the group itself, members of the group, that some sort of some sort of entity reporting to the EOTC would be, even if it's a half-time person at the beginning, to take this forward would be a really good idea.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Bill and John, thank you again for your leadership on this. It was a huge amount of work. I want to return to the elected officials for question or comments, but before I do, I want to ask any of the other 30 committee members who spent a year and a half, if they want to add comments, Katie or Michael or Pam or Nina. Good?
They were never bashful in our part.
Okay.
That's right.
Oh, well.
Sound like a quiet group.
Board, anything, you were a committee member, anything you want to contribute at this moment?
I think we all concluded that there wasn't a silver bullet solution, and that we needed a bunch of smaller solutions that I've kind of termed death by 1,000 cuts in reverse, so that every little solution helps, that we don't see one. So we should manage our expectations, and that we don't see one solution as being groundbreaking, and we're all going to go, wow, we should have done that years ago because that made a big difference. So every one of these that we try is going to help a little bit, and that's, I think, the aha moment for me was all of these smaller solutions.
Yeah, good. George or Markey?
You know, one of the interesting things when we first convened with this group is we decided that we were going to approach this from a values-based process, and to coincide with what Parsons' group was doing with our Upper Valley Mobility Study, which was really a technical aspect, with the hope that with the Parsons study completed and the forums work done, that we can come up with a way that we would be able to, the forum be able to become advocates to whatever decision the EOTC members decided on. And interestingly enough, the Parsons study really focused on the record of decision in terms of the entrance to Aspen. We really, as the forum, we really did not discuss that, which was really interesting for me. We sort of, not purposely, but we started to look at all these other options that had not really been discussed much and thought about. And so from that, we were able to come up with a lot of these ideas that could be implemented incrementally to start to address the traffic problem. So we never really, in our report, we never either supported nor opposed the idea of a future dedicated bus lane coming into Aspen using the record of decision across the Monroe property. We left that as an option down the road. And I would say that that was probably a good point, because I think the things, to steal something that Bill Kane said that really stuck to me, one of the points he made at the very end was the ideas that we came up with for us to start to look at ride sharing, ride hailing, a system that, an app, a transportation app. These are ideas that I think are economically feasible and politically acceptable. And I think that's really important, because we do not want to get bogged down into a decision that we knew would just stall the whole process if we did not have the ability to fund it or the political will to follow through. So I think that was really important, the way we moved through this process.
I echo exactly what George and Ward are saying. I think what we found very early in the game, that certain solutions came with a huge price tag that would have been extremely difficult to swallow and to support within the various constituencies. I think that would have been really, really tough, and that's the record of decision and the real property. So I thought it was very valuable that we came from a values-based perspective, really spent a lot of time on values, and then began to look at incremental approaches that the cost was not staggering, but incrementally we might get some good relief if we clearly understand how these options would intercept and work together. And I'm a firm supporter of the planner type person, really looking at these in detail and coming back to this board to help us identify what the cost might be and what the success factor might be.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Marky. Additional comments from Nicking County or Snowmass or Aspen City Council? Greg?
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the new entity. Whenever anybody mentions the new entity in Aspen, I get nervous, only because we know how they tend to grow. So what Marky reassures me when she talks about incremental approaches, and I can see that if you start at the half-timer and build it from there, maybe that'll be the way to go. But if there's anything more you'd want to tell us about that, that's one. The second thing is I've been on this horse lately about another hub on this, which would be Nega Mobility, maybe after Amory Lovins, where if we can encourage people to use this system somehow to avoid the commute, whether it's an employer bringing an employee or an employee who doesn't need to come up or down Valley and work from home. It's not a new idea. I'm just thinking, should we be incorporating it here and encouraging the development of that as well? And maybe our hubs actually could become hubs for getting such work done if they can't do it from home.
That could be a sixth node on this.
I just wanted to add another node.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, Greg. Thank you. Steve and then Ann.
I sat down and in about 3 minutes wrote a list of ideas of things that should be tried to make this whole system actually work. And I think if you asked anybody who commutes up from down Valley into Aspen, they could probably come up with a list of 5 things real quickly also. Mm-hmm. So we need a good system, I think, for gathering input from the public to kind of flesh out the different ideas and a way to get new ideas, or a way to kind of tackle the sacred cows that you're not allowed to tackle, like the entrance to Aspen record of decision, which I think it's harder to change that than to change the U.S. Constitution. But real quickly, my 4 things that I wrote down, just real quickly, things that I think would make our whole mobility system work better. One would be to allow carpool and van pool vehicles to use the bus only lane coming into Aspen. If we're trying to get people to ride, to do these things, do the car sharing, various things, and they're sitting in a long line of cars with the buses going by them, that's a disincentive to keep doing the van pool. So if you let a vehicle with over a certain number of people in it use the bus only lane into town, that would be a huge incentive for people to do that.
Okay.
There should be at the RAFTA parking lots, intercept lots all up and down the valley, they're supposed to be only for people riding the RAFTA system. But if you want people to actually be doing carpooling in various modes of transportation, those intercept lots should also be allowed for people to park who are doing ride-sharing kind of things and who are not necessarily riding the raft bus. To accomplish this, we might need to come up with more funding from other sources besides RAFTA to pay for maintaining and expanding those systems, the parking systems. Along with what Greg said, we should consider our broadband or fiber optic network as part of our transportation system. The more money we put into that to speed up our information superhighway, so to speak, the less people would have to actually drive to their job all the time, and that would cut down on the traffic. And then lastly, I think we should learn lessons from the Grand Avenue Bridge closure, what we can apply here. For instance, RAFT is offering free bus service on the people north of the river to get to Glenwood. And the ridership has jumped up. Well, you couple that with a huge disincentive, like a huge traffic jam, and people start riding the RAFT because it's offered for free. So that would be just one example of, one lesson that we could learn from Grand Avenue Bridge that we could potentially apply here. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steve. I want to interject something to both Steve and Greg's comments because they're really good and timely. Next on our agenda, we're going to hear about the Aspen Mobility Lab. And the Aspen Mobility Lab is a 3-month transportation and streetscape experiment running next summer that's going to challenge the status quo of mobility options into, out of, and around Aspen. We've been putting this together. And the mobility experiment that we're going to be hearing about shortly will be very much informed by the principles set forth in the Upper Valley Mobility Report. And what was in the next steps that Bill Kane talked about, there were 3. One is this regional entity, Greg referenced that. But the other 2, that's not going to be the first thing that's happening, is to create a new entity. The first thing that's going to happen are 2 of the other 2 steps, next steps that Bill referred to. One is to model the options, and we're going to be incorporating this to do exactly that, incorporating what's presented here in the Mobility Lab. And then it's going to help us develop the implementation strategy that we referred to also. This was step 1, and then we're going to be hearing about step 2 to move this forward. So, Greg, don't panic. There's not a new entity being fired up right away. And Steve, you just listed it. You just generated a list of really good ideas that can also be added to the experiment as we develop it forward. So thank you for your comments. Ann?
Yeah, so I kind of watched on the sidelines on this and went to the lectures, heard about the discussions, and wasn't quite sure what was going to come out of it. But what you've done is fantastic. I mean, it's comprehensive, it's understandable, it really lays out the direction we should go. I think 2 of the best things that you've done in here is kind of get rid of this myth that public transit will get rid of traffic. I think that's one of the hurdles that we constantly fight against is if more people are in buses, there'll be less cars on the road. Just the same as if we add a couple more lanes, then traffic will move better. So to see it written down and so clearly explained. And then the other is the concept of induced traffic, getting that out there so that people really understand that the solutions aren't, again, more lanes, more concrete. In terms of who takes this forward, I think a single entity would be justified at some point. And we talked about this again this morning at RAFTA, this full day of transit mobility. That every discussion, whether it's a community discussion, a city, a county, a business, Aspen Ski Company, it's housing and transportation come up. So eventually someone taking over a larger project, I think, would be justified. I'm not sure who that would be. But a couple of things before we got there. When I read, and again, something we struggled with is what does success look like? Does success mean you're going 25 miles an hour instead of 20 miles an hour? Does it mean that the road is 80% full instead of... And what we've got in the report for success is great, but I would hope as we take this further that we can get a little more specific. Again, drilling down on this, success is not getting rid of congestion. To me, success is more, and this is what we're going to try and do in the mobility lab. Success is more presenting a range of option, the facility of switching from one mode to another mode, so that everything takes on equal importance, whether it's the bike, the bus, the car. You can use any mode of transportation as easily as any other, and point to point with the various apps. So hopefully we can kind of refine that. In terms of evaluating the options, we'll be doing that in the mobility lab. And I think the benefit there is we won't be doing them in isolation, which would be very hard, as you explained. Add more buses isn't going to solve the problem. It's a combination of all of these. So hopefully in our mobility lab, we'll be able to take all of them at once and kind of keep moving one way or another as some succeed. And then, of course, by the end of this summer, we'll be ready to implement a strategy and implement the plan. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And good comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Rachel.
Thank you. I really appreciate what everyone else has said. I sure appreciate the work that's gone into this. It does seem like a deja vu moment in so many ways. But so I have a few questions that really don't need to be answered now. It's more just for our thought. I was always under the impression that you couldn't toll a state highway or road unless there was a free alternative as well. So doing congestion pricing on State Highway 82 might be challenging. I kind of am just wondering about the regional entity that reports to EOTC in the question of, is that more about building additional planning capacity through RAFTA and getting more out of RAFTA, or now a third transportation or entity? Because if the formation of RAFTA as a regional transportation authority, to me, was that regional entity that would be reporting and working with the EOTC as it has in the past. But I can certainly see there's more work to be done and perhaps more capacity to be added if that would be the home of it. But I don't want to think, oh, we have to create a new entity that then reports to the RAFTA board or RAFTA board report. It gets confusing, too many folks. And I also think that what I've been hearing a little lately since the report's coming out and some of the stuff is really questioning whether induced traffic is real. And that's just the phrase people are using to avoid creating a 4-lane that we need, or however it's being phrased. And so I think perhaps some more citations of the national experts and examples that are there. We do see it in El Jebel, but if people look to the Front Range of Colorado, when they expanded the road between Denver and Colorado Springs, it wasn't supposed to fill for 20 years, and it reached full capacity within 5. And part of that starts to become and a real acknowledgement of that there's a lot of growth drivers outside of anyone in this room's control, and whether that's Garfield County, whether it's Eagle County, as we recently saw with that El Jebel vote. And so I just recall so clearly, even when the EIS was released in, was it 98, that people doubted the projections for growth. There's no way there's going to be that many people in the valley in the year 2015, and it just has come to pass. It's clearly verified, so I have no doubt about those numbers. So I think that we need to just make sure they're continued to be shored up so that there's not that doubt. I do think RAFTA plays an incredibly important role for all of us in reducing or offering the alternatives, but as people have said, it's not the sole answer for a lot of reasons. And you really literally heard people at different times saying, well, I will vote for the RTA or the RAFTA tax or the RAFTA increase, so there'll be more room for me to drive. It's always that people are voting for it for other people to use it, so I'll have a clear shot. And I don't think that mindset's necessarily gone away. So this is a lot of work to be done to change those components. And the factor I've really thought about a lot that maybe is where we kind of miss a little bit is how busy people are in their current lives. If your connection from Hunter Creek to Ruby Park and then Ruby Park to a place is going to take you 40 minutes, and there's going to be 40 minutes on the way home to do a 20-minute errand, people will drive. You know, so I think we're just not talking about when you have two jobs and you have to get between the two jobs. You know, people's time is much more limited now. It's not that casual, relaxed place where we used to be. And I think people's own time crunch is part of what's driving the drive. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Rachel. At today's retreat, Rachel, you couldn't be more timely because it actually, one of the slogans came up and it was, support RAFTA, get your neighbor off the road. Rachel, thank you very much. Rachel, I think I lend a lot of weight to your comments because of your history with this and all the work you did on the RTA back in the day, and creating very much the system we have in place. So thank you personally as a local for your history on this. Other comments? Patty or guys, good? George?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about one of the stronger recommendations that came out, because when we look at all these ideas, the question from the forum was, well, what's next? Who's going to carry this forward? How are we going to ensure that this actually gets done and we're able to actually quantify the results? And so this new entity, what we've discussed actually at this table before as well, is the need for a regional planner. And that regional planner would really first just specifically focus on the Upper Valley with the long-term goal of working with other municipalities as well as RAFTA throughout the valley. But the need of a regional planner is to me is to a point that we don't have any staff in any of our jurisdictions that are really able to do this. They all have their own roles and responsibilities, and there's no coordination or no linkage between these entities, and a regional planner would provide that. And so I'm going to suggest that when we start to look at our budget at our next meeting, that staff puts together some numbers, what it would look like to bring a regional planner in, and that would be a discussion for October. But I think it's a critical component of this for the success of anything that we are trying.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Guys, Adam?
Yeah, George, for a point of clarification, the regional planner about transportation or about development and?
Transportation.
Okay.
I agree with that, George, very much. And it may or may not be ready for the October meeting, but I'd love to have some sort of range of what it would cost to develop the ride share app or the ride hailing app, and is the technology available?
Rachel,
thank you.
It's coming, and we're working on it as part of the mobility lab. We actually have design laid out. We're working some numbers around it, and we're developing. And this will all, as we have more information, we'll.
And that will come to us for the budget in time in October, or perhaps we'd be doing an ad.
We're creating it as part of the mobility lab, and Ashley's going to touch on this. I mean, it's a little bit ahead, but it's all part of the conversation. But thank you. It's exactly kind of forward thinking this whole program's about. Steve.
Yeah, thank you. On your chart where you rated all the things, it's on page 53 for those who want to look at the kind of the final results of the matrix study. You have a wide range from the top being an enhanced bus rapid transit, had the most points, down to increased highway capacity actually had negative points, but then there's a whole range of different scores. Do you think, or do we think that what we will be doing is some of all of these strategies, or is it going to be to focus on the ones that got the most points, or the ones that are the easiest to implement, or what is the strategy going to be?
Could I address a question implicit in that? Is that yes. So we consciously, we went through that extraordinarily complex, and I will say time-consuming matrix, which made Bill sleep much better at night after we'd done that.
Gotta have a matrix.
it was really, really eye-opening to go through that process, to look at, 9 values and 12 options and go through a very, very elaborate process to think through and then rethink through. We did it a couple of times. But we didn't, at the end of all that, we said, okay, this is great, and then we put it aside. And by the way, we did a second thing, which George had suggested as a member of the roundtable, of the task force. He had suggested, in addition to this very complicated matrix, let's just each list our 3 favorite things. And so that's in the addendum to this report, too. At the end of it all, we've set all of that aside, and we had a different, I actually think, deeper conversation about now. We've looked at these options. We've talked about how they reflect our values as a community. Now let's talk about what will actually work as a package, as a system. We really did get carried away because of our speakers. I mean, the speakers really drove that home. If you want to make a difference on the highway, you've got to think in systemic terms, and you really have to think of a package, this package. And we assembled, I mean, obviously they had to score above a certain threshold to even be considered for this, but these are the things that we felt after a lot of discussion, and in the final meeting, the group agreed unanimously to this combination, that we felt would make a package that would work together most effectively. And that's the simplest way to put it. We didn't just pick our favorites or what scored high automatically. It was what would work together as a group, as a package, as a system, if that helps.
Yeah, to add, I think specifically, Steve, it was, let's start with the recommendations in what we're calling our integrated mobility system, and let's play through those before we reach out for others. One other thought about the planner, the regional planner that would be focused on transportation, and we didn't make that recommendation lightly, and I think the history has been that when you identify a new need for staff, the tendency historically has been to just graft somebody from the city of Aspen or from Pitkin County, and it honestly never works because they've got full workloads already, and if it's just an add-on, it just isn't taken seriously. I think we mentioned early on to Dan Blankenship that maybe this would be added to his work list, and the poor guy, I think, got sick or went to the he turned white anyway, but it pointed out how difficult that is to just kind of add that on to an existing position.
Yeah,
really
good.
difficult. So
Good, thanks. Ward.
Steve, I think George mentioned 2 of the things right away that kind of focus on what's economically and politically doable, and on top of that, I think, is to be able to phase in. It's impossible to phase in light rail. It's all in, all done, and I think the same with the 4-laning. But to be economically and politically doable, I think were key factors that were considered.
Thanks, Ward. Adam?
I guess I'll just make a couple comments. First of all, thank you to everyone on the list. I read it, and besides Zoe, wherever she is, she's the only person I don't think I actually know who's on the list, and I think it's great, so I do want to say thank you. Over the last couple months, this is the first time since I've been up here in 6 years that actually we've been having discussions of substance on this issue, which is a little funny, because if you ask people outside this building, what are the real driving important aspects about Aspen, housing and transportation, and maybe it was because there was just so much fatigue about this entrance to Aspen discussion that made it so it got so stuck. I do want to emphasize what Rachel said about this induced demand, which I think is finally starting to catch on to other people besides those that have studied it for it doesn't take more than a couple hours to realize Aspen is different, or the valley is different, but not that much different than the reality of what's going on out there. I have some, as someone who spent a lot of time in Singapore and London, I love congestion pricing in theory when you're dealing with people that are mostly commuting for work. In a tourist town, the technicalities of it's not, we think it's our main street, but it's really a state highway, and how that goes. And there's a huge chunk of a population who are driving, who are just going to pass the cost on to the project that they're going in to build, and still wondering how it does not just hit the locals who are going to end up paying the brunt of the congestion pricing. But I think it's important to look at. I think when you look at these individually, none of them stand out as some aha moment. It's just a matter of, I do think we need to try a bunch of different things and kind of see what sticks. I just want to make a comment on light rail. To me, it's not about a cost, and I've said this before at the city. I think if light rail is offered to this community for free, it will never see the light of day once people understand the infrastructure needed and the signage needed that comes into this town. I have no idea how the infrastructure of light rail matches up with anything to do with community values. I have no problem, I'm not against light rail, I'm just saying that these are not cute little San Francisco trolleys coming up and down and blowing a cute little whistle. This is like a major train station and system, which I think the smallest city in the country that operates a light rail is 600,000 people. And so I think, while I appreciate that it's there, I do think at the end of the day, the enhanced bus system is going to be the major force from the public transportation system of how we're going to operate kind of going forward for all the reasons. But to me, yes, it's a lot more money, but I don't think it has anything to do with cost, why I don't see it happening here for a really long time. And everything else, I think we just keep on trying stuff. I have asked people, we're trying to get fewer people to come over the bridge, and I think it's one of the unsung heroes is that we actually have fewer people coming over.
Adam, wait, I want to correct that. I want to be careful with the words. We want the people, not the cars.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Sorry.
People are all welcome. We want people, not the cars. Let's be careful.
So the fact that we don't have more cars coming over the bridge since 1993, I think is really, really impressive. But we are trying to figure out how to get fewer cars to come over. Everyone else is trying to figure out how to get their car to get over the bridge quicker. And those are two completely different situations, which I think you guys have kind of zeroed in on. I'm trying to figure out how to do some kind of a system about that. So to me, it's a little bit of managing expectations, and I think we're starting to get there. It's been a while, for better or worse, than when people stop coming to town saying, where's my $400,000 4-bedroom house? That's never going to happen in this community. But that doesn't mean that we aren't instituting other solutions that can try to help a housing program. And this idea of the free-flowing traffic, I just think is not really capable. I don't know of another city of desire that doesn't have a traffic problem, or that it hasn't been solved. I actually think we're doing a lot better than a lot of other places, which might be hard to. If you look at the percentage of population that's using bus ridership, the amount of people on bikes, all sorts of information, I think we're very lucky to be where we are. But I'm really glad that actually there's a time and commitment. There's finally kind of we're trying to tackle the issue with a lot more horsepower. And if the entrance to Aspen decision comes up at some other point, that's fine. I'm philosophically not opposed to the straight shot thing. I just don't want to do anything that's not going to save a lot of time. And I don't see this saving a lot of time, and that's why I haven't wanted to spend a lot of time focusing on the realignment or the expansion of the road. So, I think we give all this stuff a shot, and we have some mobility stuff that's hopefully going to come this springtime, and we'll kind of reassess. As far as who should be running it and how, I guess, I'll leave that to the smarter people. And so I appreciate all the work, Bill and John and everyone else that worked on it, and thank you, Crystal.
Great, Adam, thanks for the comments. Good. Would you like to add a comment? Please.
I'm a resident of Snowmass, and I've been coming here for about 20 years. My name's Eric Simon. I appreciate the intellectual capacity of the Aspen Institute and everybody here. And I think that they have put forth a plan that could be implemented in any city in this country. Except for the mountain-to-mountain direct transport. These concepts, ultimately would be helpful anywhere. But the problem is they're not helpful here now. We have physical problems and physical limitations that have to be addressed before we talk about ride sharing and additional buses and charging people to come into town. I can go anywhere in this country and drive to the Aspen Airport on roads that are 2 lanes each way. Other than possibly road construction in a very rural area, I can drive from my home in Boca Raton, Florida, to the Aspen Airport and never be off a road that has 2 lanes each way. All of a sudden, when I pass the Aspen Airport, this wonderful 2-lane each way road goes down to 1 lane. And there's a backup, and that backup won't be corrected by anything that's been put forth here. That backup going into 1 lane is a major problem that has to be corrected. Then, not only do we have the 1-lane backup, but we come to a roundabout with a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit that serves 3 roads that at any time during the day creates a backup. We go past that and we come to a 2-lane bridge with no ability for expansion that causes another backup. And then we've got the S-curve. And then in Aspen, we have horrible parking problems, okay? These physical issues have to be addressed. And I haven't heard one word about addressing these issues. As a matter of fact, the report specifically says we're not going to even talk about these issues. It seems to me that we have to have 2 lanes each way in and out of Aspen. We have to have something to deal with the roundabout. I think we have to have an overpass over it. You know, I hate to say it, it would be expensive, but unless you do it, we're always going to have traffic backups. I think we need a split traffic concept that was referred to in this report, where maybe from Cemetery Lane, we have a straight shot into Aspen, but a 1-lane road of 2 lanes going into Aspen, and use the existing S-curve as a 1-way out. We have a loop system. And if we did that in the Maralt space, and I know, Mary, you were opposed to doing anything in the Maralt space, but we could have a very large parking lot with maybe free shuttles or some economic benefit so that parking is next to Aspen, but we don't have to drive into Aspen. I think that would take the parking off the streets. Another concept would be to have 3-lane roads, and if you want to get modern, have reversible lanes. So in the morning we have 2 lanes going in, and in the afternoon we have 2 lanes going out. I think that we have real problems. Aspen is a city with practically 1 entrance. There is never going to be another entrance to Aspen unless you go over a very treacherous mountain. So while all of these concepts are very nice to talk about, ultimately, I've been sitting here year after year after year wondering when we're going to exist or address and fix the physical problems.
Yeah, good.
That's my comment.
Eric, thank you so much for your comments. Do you spend the summer up here with us?
I spend summers, yes.
Yeah, good.
And I'm glad I'm not where I live right now.
Yeah, right.
A little tough there.
I was wondering if you just came to get away from the weather in Florida. Good. Eric, thank you so much for your comments. We're aware of everything you said.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But
Adam, what are you going to say?
I just wanted to appreciate your comments. Some of the smaller things have been studied. Everything that you talk about is a summation of adding capacity at the end of the day. And what some of us have known for a little, some of us assume for a little bit, some of us are learning, is that when you add capacity, more people start to use it. So right now, the frustration is in the peak of summer, it takes 30 minutes to go from the airport into Aspen. If we were to add the capacities that you're talking about, at some point, it's going to go down to 22 minutes instead of 30. And then all of a sudden, those that will drive at 22 minutes that don't drive at 30 on the bus or bike are getting on it, and more people are going to get in the road and fill it up. This happens in every size town everywhere in the world, and that's what the fancy word is, induced demand, which is that adding capacity adds demand because
You've got physical limitations that,
Okay, yeah.
that demand a backup.
Okay, so Eric and Adam,
Okay.
I want to turn this not into a debate about
Right.
the answer,
Yeah,
but Eric, we
I've
we
given
got
you my comments.
Okay.
got your
You
point.
know them.
Thank you so much. Just speaking very broadly, because I perhaps am responsible for driving this whole thing. And one day when I knocked on Crystal's door and said, could we reconstitute what John Bennett did in the 1990s, this conversation. So some of this falls on my shoulders. I want to tell you very broadly where I was coming from when this whole thing started. If you look through the lens of, as you described it, not enough capacity, it leads you to a solution to build lanes and more parking. If you define the problem through not enough capacity, if you define the problem through the lens of too many cars, it leads you to a solution to reduce the number of cars. And based on the discussion that 30 people had for a year and a half around that table and the value matrix that Bill and John described to us, the priority was to do the best we can to reduce the number of cars, not to build more capacity. So we've defined the problem this way, and we hope we've done it in a way that's sensible and responsible. And as I said, we're going to follow it up with this mobility experiment and see if it works. And if it doesn't, then perhaps next year on your visit, you can come back and say, see, I told you so, and maybe we'll take us in a different direction. But we're doing something, as I said, we hope is sensible and responsible, and we're all going to learn about it. So that's kind of why we're here. Again, everything you said is valid, and
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
thank
to
you for
speak
being here.
before you.
Okay, good. Is there any additional things to add at this time? Anybody want to add? Mike, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the Aspen Institute and this committee for spending all the time that they've spent on this. Having said that, I guess I'm a little bit troubled by the direction and the composition of the group. Bill, with all due respect of your comments about the statistically valid cross section of the community, when I read through this list of people that attended, it's not a cross section of the community. And so and when I look at this, it looks like a committee that was well, I understand that there's some diverse members. The overwhelming majority of the people came up with exactly the solution that I would have expected them to come up with, as opposed to a broader approach that would have invited a greater variety of views to participate in this project. So I think that you all think that you are really understanding what the community wants. I can tell you that as a member of the community, I don't think you do. I think that elected officials and staff have a vision and a view that I don't think it's what the community wants. And so I think that you are convincing yourself what the community wants instead of really being willing to ask the community what it wants.
Mike, I have to challenge that. I can tell you
You
firsthand,
know what,
Mike.
Steve, why don't you let me finish my
Well,
comments?
people get elected based on the things they stand for, and then they carry out their vision.
Well, okay.
Well, so Mike, run for city council.
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, there you go. So.
But that's my view.
Okay.
Steve,
All right.
thank you very much. For giving me the opportunity to
Sorry,
present
sorry,
my view, and I know you want to challenge that, but that's my view, and I think that it's imperfect. The selection of our leaders is an imperfect mirror of our community, and to think that it is a perfect mirror of our community, that's just not.
I'm sorry.
That's just not correct. When I look through this study and I've listened to the reports, and by no means do I pretend to understand all this stuff. I am, and having listened to these debates about our traffic problems for all these years, I can't for the life of me figure out why it is that the public schools and the private schools are never mentioned in a document like this. It's here again, I'm not an engineer, but it's very obvious to me that a huge part of our traffic problem is related to our schools. And yet nobody ever engages the schools in trying to figure out a way to reduce the traffic that is generated by the school kids and the parents. You know, my kids don't go to, you know, my kids went to school here and they've grown up and they're gone, and I went to school here and whatnot. But, you know, as long as I can remember, nobody has done anything about the school traffic. The school's bus transportation system is lousy. You know, my kids would never ride the bus. I mean, in you know, 12 years of going to school, you know, they rode the bus, you know, maybe 20% of the time, maybe 20% of the time. When I went to school, the school was in the same place. I lived on the east side of town. I rode the school bus like 3 times in my entire life. You know, it was shitty then, and it's no better now. And so I just, it's extremely low-hanging fruit, in my view, to engage with the student population and the parents to figure out a way to get some of these students and parents off the road. And so, you know, one challenge that I give to you all is, you know, please engage our school system to find a solution, or to find, here again, I get that there are no, you know, magic bullets, but you know, that is low-hanging fruit. And I don't know if it's lack of political will. You all are politicians, and there's a whole bunch of people that vote, and so, you know, if we disrupt that constituency, you're not going to get elected or whatever, but have some leadership, and that's an opportunity for leadership.
Mike, I appreciate the sentiment, but I have to tell you, meetings have occurred repeatedly with the school board over the years to ask them to please try to find new ways to address this problem. And literally in the 90s, trying to say, what if we had a school bus at the Forest Service station and parents could drop their kids off there and stay off the Castle Creek Bridge and out of the roundabout, to almost every meeting we've had with the BOCC to talk about the Mommy 500. They've done different things to restrict how old a child has to be before they can drive or not drive. But believe you me, nobody has not talked to the school district about the traffic problems. And part of the construction of the ARC was hopefully that the hockey kids could leave all their hockey gear in the locker and not have to be driven up and back and forth because they couldn't take their bags on the bus. So, I mean, I just have to set the record straight. It's not as people have ignored it. It's been raised at literally every joint meeting we've had with the school board and probably the city council as well. Thank you.
And I would tell you that, therefore, that what that tells me is the school district is part of the problem, as opposed to the students. And here again, I sat on a school district transportation committee a decade ago, and this committee made a bunch of suggestions to reduce school traffic. The school district refused to act on those.
Yeah, I know, but
So-
then don't blame us. We can't force them either. You know, anyhow, we're going to have to move on if we're going to
There's a
finish
school board
this agenda.
election coming up.
Patty, do you wanna
But yeah, just real quick, Mike, I just want you to know, this is the first time I've seen this. I was not part of this hand-selected committee, so I'm still digesting. I have not come up with a decision what issue I support or don't support. I'm really open-minded, and I want you to know that. So will you include us all in this one lump? Put me on the other side for a little bit, okay?
You know, I want to say that as a resident of this community, the single best traffic enhancement that has happened in my lifetime is probably Snowmass Canyon. You know, that was a fantastic improvement to the quality of life in our valley, and that was increasing capacity. So if that was a successful enhancement to our community, I understand. I shouldn't say understand. I get some of the ideas of induced demand, but I don't totally buy that. You know, more capacity is bad, and all you have to do is look at Snowmass Canyon and Highway 82 from Buttermilk on down, and those have been, you know, quality of life enhancements for a resident. And then lastly, Ward mentioned, you know, repair by 1,000 cuts or whatever, the inverse of that. I remain very concerned about, it is very clear to me that Castle Creek Bridge and the S-curves are the most critical piece of infrastructure in our entrance to Aspen. And so I remain very concerned about the city's plans to potentially reduce the capacity of that critical infrastructure. Thank you.
Michael, thanks. Ward, you want word of one comment?
Just briefly, Tom Hill was a member of the task force, and he did present to the task force a number of mitigation efforts that the school district has made, and I would encourage you to talk to him to see what the school district has done to address traffic.
I know him.
Assistant superintendent.
Okay, Mike, thanks for the comments. Okay, we're gonna move. Tony, quick, Tony.
Hi, for the record, my name is Tony Kronberg, and I'd like to bring forward a couple of solutions, immediate solutions that can be done, and I don't think it'll probably come from the elected officials. I have 3 minutes, so what I'm going to say is going to be very quick. For a little history, I sat on the committee 25 years ago for the 2-lane parkway. I was also the lobbyist behind the free buses between Aspen and Snowmass. I worked with Ralph Trapani to make that left-hand turn into Burlingame. I worked with Randy Reedy to make a direct stop to the recreation center and to Highlands.
And what are you
I
asking
have
about?
2 recommendations right now. One is at the light going into Burlingame, that left-hand lane, people are already using it now further down from the airport, that be extended further down so that people going into Burlingame don't have to sit at that light to merge through. The second recommendation at that particular intersection is that people are already doing it right now. People are making the right-hand turn going into Buttermilk and Owl Creek Road, bootlegging off of Steve's comment that those right-hand turns should be able to use that bus lane to get out of the main traffic coming into town.
Earlier merge on your way out of
Earlier
town to
merge,
get to
thank
right
you so
merge.
much for the correct terminology. The second recommendation is going into the roundabout. You'll have all the cars coming into on the left-hand side. The right-hand lane sits empty until people are brave enough to get close enough to get into that lane. If that gets be started further back, right where the buses make that right into the roundabout, put like the right-hand turns, they can do that. That could be immediate. And I am committed as a citizen who uses that to bring that forward.
You suggest earlier merge on both in and
On
out of
both
town.
of them, yes. So people feel comfortable to know that it's okay to
all right.
do that, and that would help tremendously.
Okay.
The next thing is that, again, I really appreciate the task force review of all these different options. I think Rachel Richards hit the problem right on the head, and that is how busy people are right now. People do not have the time in their busy schedules to take advantage of all of the integrated mobility systems, because you've got to park, get out of where you're going. Your time is dependent on somebody else's time.
And your point is?
Is that that was just something that I wanted to back up Rachel, what her opinion was. I totally agree with that. What I'm looking forward to is the community outreach.
Okay.
And during that community outreach, which really surprises me, disappointed me, because Steve, we talked a year and a half ago about the Highway 82 aerial transportation system from Ruby Park that connects all 4 ski areas with the airport and Brush Creek. And you had asked me not to do the petition at the time because the gondola would be included in the Aspen Institute forum.
Right.
I tried to get that
It was
idea.
discussed, Tony.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it
what
was.
discussed? Well, it was the mountain to mountaintop, and that is, as the report says, that's not the solution. So what I'm looking forward to is the community outreach, so that there's a difference between the political will and the will of the community.
Okay.
And so
Tony,
so
good.
the question that I have is, why not can we connect, actually go in line with the values of the community, get the cars off the road, no pollution, we're not going across from rural to open space, and that people don't have to wait. That's what the...
Tony, got it.
We got
Aerial transit, got it,
Okay.
Tony.
We got to move on.
Okay, so
Tony.
the community outreach, I'm looking forward to that, because I promise we will do the petition. As I said, I waited at Steve's request, but I think that when we do the community outreach, that you can be prepared for it.
Awesome, Tony. Thank you so much. Okay, great. John and Bill, any concluding comments?
Just a segue comment.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Yes. We are, thanks for the opportunity to present. I guess one closing thought is that, and maybe it's response to Mike and maybe the tenor of the comments, was that we didn't purposely avoid things. We wanted to come forward with a recommended set of options and transportation measures that do not have to wait for the implementation of something that may be maybe charismatic, maybe aspirational, but we've been trapped into a sort of paradigm in the Valley of waiting for the perfect solution. And so I think you'll see these are pragmatic, implementable ideas. So with that, is a perfect segue to the Aspen Mobility Lab, which is next up on your agenda. We've had numerous meetings with Ashley. I think we're very pleased to participate and to help look for possible implementation techniques that may come through the Aspen Mobility Lab. So we think there's really a kind of seamless sort of transfer in your agenda here to the next topic. And we thank Steve and Ashley and the opportunity to participate in that as well. So,
Great.
John.
Great. Thanks, Bill. John?
I'll just offer a thanks. Thanks to you all for your interest in this, and to many of you and behind me who participated in this. It was an amazing 15 months. It's been said over and over, but I'll repeat it. Everything here is phasable, and everything here is reversible. There are no, bridges you cross and you can never come back, which is kind of cool. And I look forward to reading about your future discussions of all of this and the experiments that you do through the Mobility Lab or whatever else you do. I think it's very exciting. It will be very exciting just to watch how all this gets explored in the future and carried forward in whatever way. Thank you all very much.
Again, thank you, John and Bill. Great. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks,
We're going to
guys.
move to the Aspen Mobility Lab and Ashley Pearl now.
Get the real pros up here.
Oh, goodness. Such a nice segue. No easy answers.
Mike goes to you. I'll actually use this one.
Another thing about everyone saying.
I didn't mean.
Because we haven't had a project. There's been nothing.
Bending the rod is, I'm gonna have it.
Yeah, there's just no, and CDOT doesn't even have. So probably have a ballot question.
Along with 49 other.
Okay, ready? Ashley, ready? Okay. Thanks, everybody. We're going to go now to Ashley Pearl and discuss the Aspen Mobility Lab. Ashley.
Okay, great. Should I wait till work?
Okay.
No, just go.
Settle. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ashley Pearl. I work for the City of Aspen as the Climate Action Manager. And tonight I'm thrilled to present to you guys a concept called the Aspen Mobility Lab that we've put some initial thought into, but really this was the culmination where we hope to kind of put our thoughts out there and see what everyone thinks. So really excited to be here tonight, and perfect segue from the study. With me tonight, I also have Candace Olson. She's been brought on by the city as the project manager for the Aspen Mobility Lab. So while the city is leading the effort, we needed some extra capacity, so we're really excited to have Candace with us tonight. So what I'm here to do is to introduce an idea called the Mobility Lab. We're asking for support tonight, not money. We don't plan on asking the EOTC for money, so we just really want to toss the idea around, ask for your support, and see where we want to go from here as a partnership. So with that, I'll jump in. So what is the Mobility Lab? Here's your elevator pitch, or your 2-second pitch here. So the lab is a 2 to 3 month experiment that we're planning for next summer, so the summer of 2018. And the reason we're doing a lab is to test all these things that are happening. So what we want to do during the lab is we want to offer new and expanded ways for people to move around. So the lab will look at so everyone talked a little bit about, Rachel, I believe you said everyone's so busy these days. And so what we want to do is we want to put enough options on the road that if somebody is currently sitting in traffic and does not want to be in traffic, we want to provide an option that's competitive with their single occupancy vehicle. So not saying, well, if you wait 15 minutes and then you transfer for 10 minutes and then you go over here, you take this thing, don't you want that? Well, as you brought up, it's not as competitive. So we want to put all the different modes that you've heard about out there in the world, try all these new technologies to try and compete with the single occupancy vehicle. We want to do this because in the future, this group, as well as many other elected officials, are going to be making big future transportation planning decisions. Those decisions are infrastructure-based, capital-based, require lots of money, So before we spend all that money, let's test some things out. It's a safe environment. Let's see what the community likes, what it doesn't, so that a year from now we can sit down and have really informed planning decisions about where we as a community move from here. So what are we including in the lab? It's 2 parts. We're including increased transportation options. So that includes the existing modes. So the best way to get around right now for whoever it is, maybe your bike, maybe BRT, maybe WeCycle, maybe a taxi, a shuttle. However, these existing providers that are in our town, we want to work with them to expand those modes, make those modes readily available. In addition, we want to work with national mobility providers to bring in new modes. So things that you've probably heard about, like on-demand systems, rideshare systems, vans for specialty needs like moving your dog around or your tools or your stroller or whatever it is, really focusing on pooling services. So how do we get more people into a car instead of just having single occupancy vehicles? So that's the first part, put a lot more modes on the road. And then in addition, we want to provide incentives so that these things are attractive to use. So that's free and low cost services. How do we make sure that these are frequent and accessible, just like you said, Rachel? And then rewards and benefits. So possibly even paying people to use these things and park where we want to and see how they behave. So we've talked, and what we heard from the forum was that there's 2 kind of pieces and barriers to people getting out of their cars. One of them is you need to have corridor service or trunk service. And we have great service, BRT. RAFTA provides really great service there, but we know that there's more to be done on those corridors. And then we also hear from people, I would ride BRT, but I can't get there because it doesn't stop right in front of my house and I have no way. So this is called the first and last mile. The forum talks about it as well. So what we want to focus on as part of the lab is both of these, the corridor or trunk service, as well as the first last mile solutions. So when we look at the geographic area, we look at moving people from Aspen to the Intercept lot and back. We've talked with Snowmass Village a little bit about moving folks from Snowmass Village back to the Intercept lot. And then we're looking also at neighborhoods and the arterial roads. So not just the Highway 82 corridor. Because again, if we solve Highway 82 corridor, but we don't solve the first last mile, we really haven't been competitive with your private vehicle. So in downtown Aspen, and this is more specific for what we're planning, but I just want everyone to know, we need to support these modes somehow. So if we want to get a lot more people riding bikes, or we want to have more Ubers and Lyfts and taxis and shuttles, we need drop-off and pickup zones. We need bike corridors, bike parking. So we're looking at how we improve the downtown experience and accommodate and support all these modes. So some of those things include looking at an improved pedestrian experience, an improved bike experience. How do we get a more balanced use of our streets? And then how can we put more activities and services to support mobility? So when we think about who the lab serves, we like to think that it's going to serve everybody. We have a pretty big, ambitious goal here. So we're thinking about those locals who live in or near Aspen who come into town either to work, shop, dine, run errands. Our visitors, our daytime visitors, our overnight visitors, and then a lot of focus on our commuters. And as we know, our commuters are wide and diverse and have a lot of different needs. So we want to focus not just on the daytime commuters, but also those who are working in restaurants and get off at 2 a.m. and need to get home and there's not service available. How do we focus on the service workers, the industry workers, the full gamut of commuters? Why would we do this? What are the benefits going to be besides just trying a crazy idea and seeing what happens? What I really like is that we're really focused on improving safety, improving the health and the quality of life, not just for those who are stuck in traffic right now, but also those who are walking around our streets, who are trying to cross Main Street, who are trying to bike up to the school, who are trying to send their kids biking up to their school by themselves. Let's improve the experience, the health, the safety for all of our communities by doing this. In addition, we want to try out some mobility options. So one of the benefits is we're going to see a lot more options to move around. We really like this increased community engagement. So we can do everything we can as elected officials in city and county, and we can put all these new modes out there, but if nobody uses them, then we know we're going in the wrong direction. So what we're really doing is putting the community to task and saying, tell us what you want. Tell us what the barriers are to changing your behavior. Tell us if we're providing the right solutions, and if we are, tell us that by using these and getting on these modes, and if we're not, tell us and we can explore other modes. We really want to have informed decisions, so I think that's one of the benefits here. And an opportunity to innovate and lead. This group, the EOTC, RAFTA, our valley, has been leading in transportation, not just for the state, but for the nation and sometimes the world for a long, long time. So this feels like something that is very familiar to everyone here and something that I think we would all love to embrace and move forward. So when we think of a lab, why do we need a lab? We have all these reports out there. So, you know, RAFTA is in a big planning section right now. EOTC commissioned a report last year that talked about what is the future, what are our options. Right now, the city's looking at the SRTP, called the Short Range Transit Plan. The Community Forum just presented on their plans. So you're sitting here going, we have a lot of plans. Where do we go from here? I think that that's where the lab comes in best. Is the lab is not a plan. It's taking all these plans, all these ideas that we've gathered, and testing them and seeing what works and what doesn't. It's by no means locking anything in or saying this is the one answer. It's taking that full circle that the forum showed us and trying a bunch of things that are all reversible, all testable. So we won't be testing anything that is capital-based or infrastructure-based necessarily. We're really focused on those things that lend themselves more to experimentation. When it's all said and done, if we're successful, how will we know? These are the 4 things we've come up with so far. I'm sure there's some more things we can add. But one of the things is we would improve the experience for those driving, those moving about, those who are in our communities. We would end with an increased understanding of community needs. We'd look over there and say, well, those things failed. Let's not invest money in those. But these were really, we got a lot of valuable information from some of these other things. We would understand behavior changes and mode shifts and understand how we can influence our communities better. And then lastly, we would put these technologies on display and test them, because I think sometimes we are a rural community kind of removed and we hear about all these things. Oh, you go to New York and you use the app and you do the what? It's been, you know, we don't have that here. So we get to invite all of these technologies that we all hear about to our community and tell us, what does this look like? Not what does it look like in New York, but what does it look like in a rural community of our size? So that instead of just waiting 5 or whatever years and they show up here, we can see what they look like and we can inform what it looks like when they are actually operating here. So that we're not at the mercy of the technologies, but we're actually informing that and directing it and actually controlling it for the better of the community. So we have this idea, and then we have started some work on this because it's about 7 months away and we're already behind schedule. So we've brought in a lot of really key partners. So we've met with Pickens County and Snowmass Village staff and have had 3 meetings now. I'm looking over at John over there. And just introduced the idea to staff and started to really get initial ideas of how Pickens County and Snowmass Village might want to be involved. But that's one of the pieces of conversation tonight. We've talked about the community forum and really tried to align best with their report. So anything that is testable out of that report, we want to make sure we test as part of the lab. We've worked with the Community Foundation in town to talk about how we take in money and how we spend money. We also have CORE and RMI as partners who are endorsing this. We also have hired some consultants because we are not experts in mobility at the City of Aspen. So we brought on Farron Pierce, who's a national transportation consultant, and locally we brought on Design Workshop. And then so far we have staff from over 10 departments at the City of Aspen that are divided up into working groups to start to think about all the details of this lab. And we welcome staff from other jurisdictions to participate in those working groups if at the end of this meeting we think that's the appropriate way to go. We've divided up into phases, just so you know where we're at. We are in phase 1A. We hope to get out of it, but that is the phase where we figure out, can we actually do this? So our focus is fundraising. Our goal is to raise $2 million to fund the lab. We think that the lab will probably cost more than that, but that's where we're headed. In addition to fundraising, we need to see who wants to play with us, who the mobility providers are that want to come here and provide services. So just this evening, we issued an RFI that's going out to over 100 mobility providers across the nation to see who's interested in coming to Aspen and putting their technology or their modes on display. And then we're looking at this initial downtown design. How do we change the flow and to accommodate some of these modes? So as you can see there, phase 3 is when we implement this next summer, and we hope to get there. But right now we're really in the initial scoping stages. And as you're probably starting to realize this is a massive project of quite an undertaking. So there's a few critical things that we need to move forward. One of them is we do need to fundraise. We are hoping to get some partnerships locally that will help fund this, but we're working and sending Steve on fundraising tours across the country to ask national philanthropies, donors, private organizations if they want to help support Aspen doing this. So good luck, Steve. And then lastly, the focus is mobility providers, because even if we get the money, we need to make sure that people are willing to bring their services here. So the last thing I just want to let you know about is the working groups up there, so you can see the full gamut of what we're thinking about. So we have a group that's thinking about data and measurement. So how do we measure success? How do we measure the return on investment? All these different pieces, so that we know what data we need to collect now and what we need to measure throughout the lab. We have an outreach and marketing group, because of course this is going to be a large undertaking to involve the public in the scoping, as well as keep everyone updated on where we're going. We have a mobility services group, which is thinking about what are the appropriate mobility services to bring here. We have a bikes specific working group to think about all things bikes. We have a downtown group that's thinking about the layout and the flow of downtown. And lastly, we have a fundraising group. We've already started doing some research and some design of an app, because we feel like it's really important for all these modes to be in one place, because if you have to spend the time to go to 5 different places, you might as well get in your car. So an app is a huge priority here. We're also contacting over 25 locations all over the world who have done labs and experiments to learn from them. We're moving ahead really strongly with fundraising. One of our biggest priorities is partner alignment, which is what we're doing here tonight and why we've been meeting with a lot of your staff. And then, like I said, we just issued an RFI to solicit mobility providers and see who wants to work with us. So that's the work we've done to date. So before we go into discussion, I just want to say the ask tonight was not for money, but for support. We're currently fundraising, the city of Aspen is, to pay for the bulk of the lab. And we really want to move forward with doing things within our jurisdiction, making changes, providing these services. But we feel like the lab can be so much more impactful, more powerful, and really informative if we're doing things outside of the city of Aspen limits. So we're really focused, and we realize that we're going to need the support of the EOTC. We're going to need the support of Snowmass and Picken County to do that. We're really focused on the intercept lot, and I think a lot of people have brought up the intercept lot is our, as defined, intercept lot. So it's a big place where that's a big behavior change node that we should focus on. So we hope that, or we see the mobility lab as a chance for the EOTC to actually try some things at the intercept lot that you might want to invest in as part of the FLAP grant funding in 2020, I believe it is. So, you know, anything that you have been thinking about, hey, down the road, we might want to put some capital into this, or this is a larger project, this is a great time during the lab to test things. So we invite participation from any jurisdiction here, that if you have an idea you want to test that's relatively testable, I will caveat that, we'd love to invite you to participate in the lab. Tell us what you want to test, tell us what you want to experiment with. We'd love to get it in the scope. We'd love to partner with the EOTC on this and the jurisdictions. And if you have some way that you think would benefit the transportation landscape, now's the time for all the crazy ideas. So we'd love to hear them. Not necessarily tonight. I realize we're tight on time, but we don't want to just say, here's what Aspen's doing. We'll let you know how it goes. What we want to say is we have an idea. We think it can be really powerful if we have regional cooperation. It's the success of it is really determined by regional cooperation and your support. And we just want to get the idea in front of you tonight and have a discussion about what you think the partnerships could be. Steve,
Great,
did you have
Ashley.
anything to add?
No, that's good. Thank you. No, good. Thank you very much, Ashley. George.
So I've heard the intercept lot come up a few times today. And most of us know, but some don't know that EOTC committed $900,000. It's for a $4 million project that we're waiting to actually receive grant dollars. And maybe Brian Pettit can give us a quick update and what that project entails and when that will start to occur, because it is a big project, and I think that will answer some questions in terms of the utilization of the intercept lot. So if you'd allow Brian just to come up for a few minutes just to give us a quick update on that.
Hi, I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director for the county, and it's $1.9 million that was dedicated from the EOTC, $2 million from the Federal Lands Access Program. The money currently becomes available in 2021, which is 2020 in our time. That's federal budget season. But we're trying to expedite that so we can get the money sooner. It's not going to be available next year, but I'm hoping 2019 that the money will become available. It's to pave 200 additional spots, to provide security lighting, bathrooms, landscaping, and that would be it for the intercept lot. Right now, the infrastructure to support bathrooms isn't there, so there's a large cost involved to get that up to speed.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Brian. Good, George?
My numbers are way off, but thank you for correcting me.
Thanks for adding $1 million to that. Ann?
So, as usual, my presentation is great. Very thorough. But I'm wondering if you can add something to the community benefits slide. And this came out of this mobility report. Almost every option, they stressed the social equity part. And I think what we're doing, we really are enabling it and promoting social equity by providing all the different mobility options.
Thank you. That's a great point.
Thanks. Patty, let me go to Steve Child. You want to go, and then we'll come back.
Okay, thank you. I had talked to Ashley about this before, but Glenwood Springs is doing a mobility experiment right now by necessity. And they've done a whole lot of things there, realigning roads, doubling the on and off ramps off the interstate, doing a lot more bicycling, a couple of really doing some really good pedestrian bridges to get across the Roaring Fork River and the Colorado River, and so on and so on. So and I know you're thinking about it also, but the similarities are pretty striking between the what they're doing there now and what you're proposing. And just to learn from anything you can from what's happening in Glenwood and then apply that to what you're going to do in Aspen. And I am looking forward to this and very willing to participate in it.
Steve, thank you. Thank you for that, really. Patty?
Yeah, real quick, I appreciate your section on the working groups about bikes. I'm not a bike rider. I'm actually very dangerous on a bicycle. I'm a walker, and sometimes I'm dangerous on my feet, especially in the winter coming down from my house. I live at Smuggler, trying to get into town. I walk to work. I use the stairs. I don't use elevators. I try and get my miles in, my steps in. And so it'd be nice to have a focus on, because you can walk, more people can walk year-round if it's safe, and then people will ride bikes in some cases year-round. I mean, people do ride bikes year-round, but I would like to see an emphasis on that, because it's good for your mind, it's good for your body, it's good for your spirit, as long as you're safe. And
which part, Patty? Emphasis on
pedestrian.
Pedestrian.
Walking.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a fundamental component of this whole thing.
Yeah, but do you have a special group for bikes? And I'm feeling a little ousted here. I'd like to see more emphasis on feet.
We can make you the chairperson of walking.
Okay, I'll walk in and do that anytime.
No, we're going to, Patty, actually, part of this program, and the details will come out later when we're a little bit more formalized, but has to do with reorienting our streets to a better balance between cars and bikes, which will get all bikes off sidewalks and dedicate them solely to pedestrians as they should be.
Well, I walk through the town a lot, West End, East End,
Yeah.
downtown core, so I can give you a lot of input.
I'd love to pick your brain. Thank you.
That's great. Rachel?
Yeah, really quickly, I think this sounds good. I think it's what Aspen needs to do to manage the congestion and the issues within town, as well as the access to and from. But what I'm wondering, and I think it'd be helpful in your fundraising efforts, if you could talk about some of the deliverables that may come out of the $2 million. Will that be enough to fund the development of which apps and implementing and things like that? But right now, it's such a big number, and it's not broken into pieces of what may or may not happen or can be used for different aspects, that it's just a little scary. And I think people don't generally like to throw big money at things until they know there's some deliverables that are going to come out, other than the ones that you're listed there. But it sounded like, again, those are the type of dollars that are necessary to really implement some of the programs we talked about before. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Rachel, thanks. Guys, good. I want to add one comment to something Ann said. When I've been talking about this as the conversation develops, I talk about the principles being a program that delivers our community as one that's environmentally sustainable, socially equitable, and economically stronger for generations to come. This is part of a positioning of Aspen to ensure that it's healthy and successful as we evolve, as a society towards whatever the mobility future brings. So it's really those components that are the fundamental part of driving this mobility lab. It's leaving us environmentally sustainable, socially equitable, and economically stronger. Those are really three important principles to me that helped inform this whole direction. Great. Ashley, good? Greg, please.
Just at risk of being redundant, I'm concerned about redundancy. That's just is it on? Okay. I'm just concerned about redundancy in that I know we have discussed the other entities that have been working on this and working with it. As the city moves forward, I know, and I really appreciate you've reached out to everyone. I just want to make sure we're not reinventing or repeating our steps. So that's an important thing, so that people know we're moving forward or not reinventing with a new set of people.
Give me an example of what you're thinking about.
I'm just, coming into this, I know that when some of the announcements were first made about this, it sounded as if it was a bit of a surprise, perhaps, to people at the county or maybe to Raft or elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that as you're moving forward, I'm completely enthusiastic about this and want to participate. Just want to make sure that everyone knows they're included and we're not going to go and reinvent the wheel.
Great. We can't do this without Picken County and Snowmass.
Yeah. Right.
So it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we satisfy that outcome, and we will.
Thanks.
So.
And Greg, you're talking about messaging both to our partners and to the community as a whole, really having a welcoming feel. Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for hearing this, and there'll be more forthcoming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. We have just one more. We have a couple more topics, but I think we can get through these fairly quickly. I want to chat. We're going to chat briefly about the increased service on the Brush Creek corridor. This is Snowmass to the Intercept lot.
Thank you for your time to have a few minutes to talk to you. I'll be quick. You've seen this 2 times before, and those of you that were at the RAFTA board meeting today, you also got a little bit of an update on it as well. Snowmass is very encouraged that we are all talking about Upper Valley mobility and partnering on a number of transportation projects that we hope will improve the quality of life for all our citizens. Snowmass Village is really interested in improving our interconnection to the BRT service that's running on the Highway 82 corridor. As a member of the RTA and the EOTC, we see this as a very regional program. We're not sure where the provincial sort of nature of service to Snowmass comes from, but we see this as a big asset not only to Snowmass Village and Down Valley communities, but also to the entrance to Aspen. We asked Tom Oken to put the project into the EOTC budget so you would have an idea of what its impact would be on the budget in the 5-year program. You still have revenues at the end of your expenditures over revenues, so you still have a fund balance and a surplus. I think the last piece from Snowmass's perspective is that, to be quick, is that the investments that you're talking about making in the Intercept lot and talking about it as an entrance to Snowmass Village as well as to Aspen, that this is an important, that what you should have learned from your BRT experience to date is the success that you're seeing now in the Intercept lot is tied directly to frequency of service. And it makes sense for Snowmass to participate But if it isn't going to have a level of service that we can consider reasonable to capture employees commuting to Snowmass, I'm not sure that that plays to Snowmass's advantage. That's just an observation on my part, but I think you can understand the logic of that sort of thinking. We would appreciate your support for this. Those of you that were at the Aspen or the RAFTA meeting today, you know that RAFTA's budget presentation was basically a status quo budget. And the unspoken message there is in 5 years, that's probably something that's going to be difficult for RAFTA to sustain. And so they're starting to talk about potential revenue sources. So I don't know if RAFTA is going to be able to chip in and help with this regional service plan, but we hope they would. But we would be looking for the EOTC to help if they can't.
If they can.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Dave. Great. Clint, anything you want to add?
No.
Okay, Dave. What is your? You just want to inform us that this is coming forward, and you're looking for funding one way or another.
Right.
At this time, you're not asking us to authorize anything or.
Not this evening.
At
I
this
mean,
time, good.
the action will be next month, but we wanted to
Okay.
keep it in front of you.
Okay. Guys, questions for Dave or Clint? George?
Well, I would say, and I mentioned this at the last time you did a short presentation. I think it's a little premature to come before the EOTC for requests for dollars for this increased service. I think it needs to begin with RAFTA. RAFTA is going to start their budget process next month. I think that Dan is going to be looking at what it would cost for RAFTA to take on this project. The board will discuss it, and then we'll sort of see where it goes. It's not to preclude any contribution from the EOTC, but I think it's premature for the EOTC to be looking at this at a budgetary item and decision before it goes before our primary transit organization, which is RAFTA.
So to that end, I think if this board then, if that's the position, if this board could support the service level and then direct staff to identify how to solve the funding levels, I think we can do that. But I think the support from this board eventually, not tonight, but hopefully next month, can say, yes, we want to make this happen. We would trust that RAFTA would give us the best deal possible, work that within their service plan, and then we'd come back to the EOTC to say, let's look at this gap and see how best to address it.
I would add one comment to that, Clint. And I think George is right as far as the direction goes, in part because, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe RAFTA considers Carbondale as regional trunk service and pays for Carbondale Circulator. And it also considers Snowmass as regional trunk service. And perhaps, Tony, Dan is saying yes, who knows? Are you saying no? Okay, yeah, thanks, okay.
It's true for Snowmass Village, for sure.
Snowmass is regional trunk service, which would fall under the auspices of RAFTA, I think, before it would under EOTC. So it's something we'll discuss. Dan, I'm not putting you on the spot right now, unless you want to be. Okay. Do we want Dan on the spot? Dan,
we're going to be working with him.
Dan, you can see where this discussion is going. It's gonna come back to RAFTA. And what do you?
May I?
Get a microphone.
How much time do we have? An hour? I think it's perfectly legitimate for this request to go to the RAFTA board, but we have other members who also feel as though they deserve more service too. Glenwood Springs is the second largest contributor to RAFTA sales tax behind the city of Aspen. And BRT stops at 27th Street. They have a local bus, our bus, that will get you to the other end of town, but that goes to every hour after 8:15 p.m. So when this discussion happens, it needs to happen in a context of all the other needs that we have. And in the I-70 corridor, we promised certain service levels to the folks in Newcastle when we passed the 2008 sales tax increase. And we implemented those increases, some of them, and then we cut them back. So they have a bare bones service out there. And so they have needs. So this discussion really needs to happen in the context of all of
Service
the requests
demands.
that are coming
Yeah,
in.
okay.
And at the retreat today, we talked about RAFT's long-term sustainability and how unless we get more resources, we're going to have a very difficult time maintaining what we do today. So as we add more service without kind of addressing the fundamental or structural financial issues that we have, we just make the problem more severe.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, great, Dan. That provides context for us. I would add one thing to Dan's comments. It's just a heads up for EOTC members. One thing for us to keep in mind is the percentage of our dollars that are in our lock boxes or that are dedicated to line items that go to operations versus those dollars that go to capital. And there's been a shift in recent cycles to put more money towards operations, when in the past they were going more towards capital improvements. So when we discuss this next month or in the near future, it's important for us to keep as part of the discussion where our dollars are supposed to be appropriated, because originally this was an all-in entrance. I think EOTC is really it was money to address fix the entrance to Aspen, but now it's become a conversation about applying our money to operations. And one example of that is the no fare service, where we send a lot of money to run buses back and forth between Aspen, which we all love. But Rachel, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I do, and this isn't easy per se, because I appreciate the snowmass needs and the snowmass values. We have to bear in mind that there's a reason we use the term park and ride, and that's when people ride down to a parking lot and then catch some bus service. And I don't know that the expectation of increasing Snowmass's bus service to every 15 minutes to match with the BRT is the only solution for people in Snowmass who are going down Valley on BRT or into Aspen on BRT. It's more about timing your individual car trip with getting into an intercept lot. And throughout the system, you go to Basalt, there's a Basalt intercept lot, and those people in Basalt aren't getting circulator service that will bring them to BRT every 15 minutes, although that was something Basalt wanted. And so again, that's awkward to say. I have the disadvantage of having been here too long, and so I know the history. And when we formed the RTA, Snowmass Village's mayor at the time and its staff came back to say, we will join the RTA, but we cannot put in the full share of money for what service we want. They wanted that service even back then. And so, but we can't afford it. We can't raise our taxes more. We're at the limit, and we have our own things to do in the village. So what we will do for our share of the RTA is to provide the Snowmass Village to Brush Creek connection out of our bus service. That way we're making our contribution and we're all even. Aspen didn't have enough money either, and it had to implement a bed tax as well. And we had to have a vote on a bed tax so that we could give more of our existing transit money to RAFTA and still support the in-town services of Aspen. But it was an extra tax that was asked for to make sure all the ambitions of what RTA could do for us would happen. That's just history.
I believe the correction on that would be that was the incorporation under the Pitkin County, and that with the formation of the RTA, I would say everybody is contributing the same.
The tax rate's the same.
This had to do with when we signed the agreements of what the services the BRT would offer. And, we can look, we look every year when we share back the countywide 2% sales tax of what is collected where. And I mean, I want to be straightforward here. I supported additional operating funds for the fare-free service to be extended to Snowmass as it is now in the winter. So we've already made a pretty good chunk of money that used to be capital to go into operating, and I have supported it in the past. I'm just not sure how far I can go, because there is the danger that this will simply become an operating fund and not a capital fund anymore. And I think that we need to look at long-term capital needs at the same time, or we're going to end up with a kind of deteriorating system, no local match to pull down greater money and things like that. But it's steadily moved forward with our commitment to BRT. We're 81% of the half penny went to support BRT and RAFTA, the RTA. And then ever more now to add services onto those. I'm not even sure how much of the original half penny is left to save for capital. So just continuing to move on. I do think RAFTA is going to need a future election for solving a sustainability problem. And I think that the way to resolve that is going to be to include more of this feeder service that all the member jurisdictions within RAFTA wants, as well as shore it up. And I think, so I hate to be saying, let's wait till something else happens, but I think that that is an opportunity that we shouldn't ignore, that that's the real question of long-term sustainability of the BRT. Because it wouldn't do us any good at all to fund this extra service to connect with a BRT that ends up having its service cut in half in 2 years or 3 years to maintain its, you know, that's just, you know, we can't eat our seed corn as we go forward with this. Snowmass has a savings fund within this document and has for a long time. And it could touch those. It could use those dollars if it chose to start doing operating instead of saving for capital. But kind of what you're requesting is that less money will go into either savings account, both Aspen and Snowmass, to fund this service. I think there could be benefits there. I think it could get more people off the road. I have no question about those things. I just need a comparative analysis of when and where we're putting our money in, and where does that leave us 5 years and 10 years out for the capital needs we have. So we all stepped into this ourselves when we went to fare free. The idea that, you know, if we can just increase our ridership by 100% on a fare free system, we'll somehow magically have the money to make up the operating cost for fare free. Fare free sounds great, it's a wonderful attraction, but until we all raise taxes more, we're not going to have it. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that there is eventually going to be a state transportation ballot measure. If it's anything like the one that went forward last year, and we're hoping to see so, Pickens County has submitted it to Colorado Counties, Inc. to say, get back on that. And that was what came through last year, made it all the way through the House, almost through the Senate, would have had the votes in the Senate, but a small subcommittee killed it, was a 0.65 cent increase in sales tax. And there was a significant share back to cities and to counties that would be flexible and could be used to improve your roads, or could be used to support your transit. There was also a transit funding component that agencies like RAFTA would be applying to themselves. Dan testified 3 times on that bill. I testified on it once. So I just, you know, I think there may be some alternatives where additional revenues we're not anticipating now are coming forward. The only way they're going to pass a state transportation bill that's a sales tax is if there is a share back to the municipalities and counties that, you know, are agreeing to sales tax, frankly, because it's a difficult way, but they're never going to pass anything on gasoline tax. So I'm open to options, and I'm open to looking at, you know, maybe it's summer only, and that number could be reduced, and it's not spring and fall as well. Maybe it's something that Snowmass says we'll put in X amount of what would have been going into our capital fund to do this. But we used the term in the past, I think, above the line and below the line, that things that were below the line are one-time off, one-time projects. Things that are above the line are being funded every year no matter what, whether it's Jazz Festival concert, or whether it's X Games, whether it's the BRT contribution. And to ask that that become above the line and reduce the capital that's going into both City of Aspen and Snowmass's, I just don't see that as directly being an above the line item. Again, I think what maybe Oaken could correct me, is it 60% of the revenues of the 2% that we collect are generated in Aspen, and maybe 18% in Snowmass Village and the rest in the county. And so I think that the ask is starting to ask that this all come out of Aspen's capital for the most part, because we did already all agree to pay for the fare-free service in the winter. That was a big change. I mean, if we look back in the budgets to that, what went above the line, was kind of always in there now, was probably, you know, 260, 300,000 a year, maybe more, just for the winter fare free. So, I just,
I may agree with you to a certain extent, except that you have to remember that Snowmass has always been capped. Its box, if you want to say, acknowledge it as that, has been capped and it shall never grow beyond that, has been generally the census.
I'd
So
be
that is
happy to
sort of a,
relook at that as well, but that had something to do with the contributions that we're able to make because of the sales tax revenue generated. So I'm happy to look at that. Maybe we should rejigger that. I'm not opposed. I'm just trying to give a history and a perspective of being very concerned. We will not have capital local match. We won't have dollars for a huge amount of capital projects that are still in front of us. It's either all going to be operating and then when a slowly deteriorating level of service because we don't have new revenues and operating costs go up, or we're going to have some money to be able to leapfrog forward more as well. Again, I'm open to variations on this, and I think there are future revenue sources that could really come down the pike for all of us, whether it's RAFTA's increase in funding or whether it's a state increase in funding.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Could I just make 2 points and then I will bow out? One is that it's a service that's needed and people would appreciate it, and it would help make the connection to Snowmass more convenient. So I have no opposition to that at all. And the RAFTA board in its deliberations may say, yes, of all these things that we have on this list, and there are many other service improvements which involve commuters that are coming into and out of town, this one is the #1 top priority, and we will do it. But that discussion really needs to happen at the board level, and it probably will play out over the next month or two. The other thing is on the Carbondale circulator, there's a little bit of a misnomer that Carbondale is getting something, for free or something that is better than Snowmass is getting. When we implemented BRT, before we had BRT, every bus that went up Valley went through Carbondale and back onto 82. If it was going to Glenwood, it went through Carbondale, and that was about, sometimes with the traffic, maybe a 20-minute diversion in both directions. These are your employees that are coming up here from those down Valley jurisdictions, and every time a bus would pull through town, they would roll their eyes and go, oh my gosh, we have to do this again. So when we implemented BRT, we discontinued providing local bus service in the core, and also all of the direct express buses and other express buses that either originated in Carbondale or passed through Carbondale from Glenwood Springs. And we're using those resources to fund a shuttle, because before there was half-hour service, but the Up Valley bus came through about the same time as the Down Valley bus, and so you have two buses going by, following each other in 2 minutes. And we said, let's get a circulator and make that every 15 minutes, and use the resources that we would have spent on these other things to pay for it. So while, yes, Snowmass is a trunk line, Snowmass is 12 miles round trip. Carbondale is maybe 2 miles maximum round trip, and you can just do a lot more with it. If we could get the buses up and down Snowmass faster, then we could provide more service, but it doesn't work very well because of the vagaries of traffic on 82. So we have a lot of downtime at the Snowmass Mall with those vehicles. And that makes that very inefficient service. But in the wintertime, you have world-class service. You have service to and from Aspen every 7 minutes during peak times, every 15 minutes throughout the course of the day. You generally have half-hour service when other communities below LG Bell are getting hourly service. So yes, there are differences, but you have to keep in mind that these other communities have needs as well.
Dan, good. Thank you for your comments. Dave and Clint, you want to respond?
Without getting into the detail, the history and the numbers and whatnot, I think what we're really asking for is a matter of equity. There's 15-minute service, 12-minute service going on right now. We're asking for twice that. We're asking for 15-minute service. We are definitely open to being reasonable, looking at different hours and those types of things. But the tax is generated 100% in the county. We're all county residents, and we're asking for half of what other people on the main trunk line get. I don't think what our ask is unreasonable. I think it's equitable, and I think that's how we made that pitch from the beginning. That's why we've been here 3 times now.
Okay. Steve, you want to comment?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I do have a question on. I'm the one person here at the table who's actually driven the RAFTA run up and down in the village shuttle. So Dave, I presume that you would be continuing doing the the spring and fall season, driving the village shuttle up and down for this service?
In Dan's memo, yeah, we generated the spring and fall.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't know about the financing of it, but are you doing that? I mean, what Rachel said, it implied that the town of Snowmass Village, that's how they are paying for a lot of that services by actually having the village shuttle doing the spring and fall. But are you getting reimbursed for that?
Yeah, we're being reimbursed by GrassRoots under contract.
Or are you subsidizing it in some fashion?
No.
Okay. Speaking as a bus rider, we're talking about a level of service here, and I'm one who has missed the once an hour bus, which happens at times of the year and times of the week. And if you miss that once an hour bus and you're in Snowmass Village, you wait an hour. I've also missed the connection at the Intercept parking lot and sat there for a half hour and it's not a very pleasant place to wait down there at the Intercept parking lot. So when we're talking about level of service, and that's what you are asking, is for an improved level of service. And if we really want people to be dependable passengers riding RAFTA regularly, if they get kind of dumped too many times and miss their connections because the service isn't very good, they're going to think about quit riding completely. And we want them to ride more, not to quit riding. So I agree with trying to improve the level of service, and I would leave it up to the staff and the boards to try to figure out the best way to pay for it.
Thank you, Steve. Greg, were you going to add something?
Yeah, real quick. You brought up frequency of service. I'm also wondering about expanding capacity in some way, more stops, for instance, or I'd love to see what else you have in mind. And I also want to just point out, as I've been told, Brush Creek Road is the busiest road in our county outside of Highway 82, and I live on Brush Creek Road, and there are times when it's like trying to get it in or out of Aspen, where it's amazing how much traffic there is now. So clearly we need this service. How we're going to make it happen is the big concern. So frequency of stops, I'm going to say it for my own neighborhood's benefit.
No,
sorry.
No,
oh, sorry.
Sorry,
regarding frequency of stops, just Brush Creek, I think I've brought it up with Dan. You're trying to get down to the Intercept lot from Brush Creek, you can't. And so you end up walking on a very dangerous stretch of road. So I want to bring that up.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you so much. You guys, this is coming back to us in a month around the budgets. Billy, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I just want to say that just to lobby for this a bit more, that I just think it's really important throughout this whole conversation that philosophically we're trying to get people to ride the bus. And if we have that increased frequency, it's just going to add to it. Snowmass is a bed base for Aspen as well, so obviously it's going to benefit Aspen as a part of the whole transportation system. I think it's the numbers is about 80% into 20% is going into capital projects now, and we're really funding a lot of these operations. This in particular, I think, is important. If we need to go through RAFTA's budget process in order to then get to this point where we're back, we're kicking the can down the road. So I would just encourage us to fund this operation so that we can get on with these 15-minute headways in a shorter time frame.
Steve, real quick.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay, real quick, 60 seconds here. Rachel mentioned park and ride. Remember, Snowmass doesn't have the WeCycle. And we're not capable of having the WeCycle. Basalt and other communities do. So our WeCycle is going down Brush Creek Road to the Intercept lot.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tom. Alyssa, what were you going to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, since 8:30 this morning, I've been talking about transportation. And I'm a little tired of talking about it. But, everyone's sitting here saying how busy people are and, how they can't, they don't want to waste time. They don't want to spend an hour running an errand in Aspen. Well, it's the same thing. If you want to go from Snowmass Village to Aspen and you don't want to spend an hour sitting at the Intercept lot or 30 minutes in the freezing cold, it's the same exact thing. If you're trying to keep the cars out of Aspen, reduce the number, not keep them out, but reduce the number, you have to look at Snowmass. Dave's memo said it, 46% of the people in Snowmass work in Aspen. That's 10% of the commutership that's going into Aspen every day. You know, I mean, I think we really need to rethink it. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about the entrance to Aspen. Well, in some ways, it starts at Snowmass. So I think if we're gonna move forward and try to do things like the mobility study, I mean, one of the things that they talked about in the mobility lab was this idea of the intercept lot and how you increase service at the intercept lot. So I just wanted to reiterate.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Alyssa. Rachel?
Just really quickly,
Final comment?
I agree with the value, the merit, and the desirability. And I really feel literally like I'm back there before we passed the halfpenny in the first place, where we all knew what service we wanted and how we would get there, but we didn't pass a full penny. We only passed a halfpenny, and the amount's getting smaller and smaller. And as you take a look at that spreadsheet, you'll see there is no savings account for Picken County. We have transportation needs that go up the Frying Pan, up the Crystal River, all over the place. We don't have a savings account. Picken County put its share of money in to make BRT work at all. And it's only Snowmass and Aspen that have a capital savings account. So what I'm asking is, should some of that come out of that? And I'm more than happy to look at rejiggering, how we save or what we save, but we're getting a smaller and smaller slice of pie, and it's getting hard for all of us to let it go, because we have all big future plans. But just note, if we talk about equity, where is the Picken County savings account for capital needs? It's not there. So we come hat in hand, and can you help us with the basalt underpass? It'll help. Will help us with this. But, so maybe it is time to relook at all those formulas. But I have no doubt about the potential merit of the service. I just feel like I need to put a stake out there that says, if we go all to operating, we will not have capital improvements. We will not upgrade. And we probably, instead of fighting over these last crumbs here that are left in EOTC, need to rally behind and increase for RAFTA and passing the state transportation.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel. And that parallels some of the topics we discussed this morning at RAFTA. In fact, we spent a whole morning on it. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. We're gonna thank you, Clint and Dave. We'll be back next month to finish this up. Final comments here. We're gonna touch on. Dan, is this you or John?
Either way, we just have a quick
update. Agenda,
update.
just a couple updates.
Mr. Blankenship on the Grand Avenue Bridge mitigation, transit mitigation plan, and the basalt underpass.
I'll take the easy one first. Basalt underpass is essentially complete. There's still some final fit and finish landscaping that needs to be done, but we're thinking that by around Thanksgiving, the project will be essentially completed. I had an opportunity to use the underpass today coming back from the retreat, and it's really a beautiful facility. If it hadn't been there, I would have missed the BRT to get up here for the meeting. I was able to run across the street and not have to wait 4 minutes for a safe crossing. It's beautiful, and thanks to this body and CDOT and Basalt and everybody that was involved in the project, it will probably keep people from being injured, and it's a tremendous amenity for the Basalt community. The other thing that I'll give you a brief update on is that RAFTA has been providing mitigation for the Grand Avenue Bridge closure, which went into effect on August 14th. Thanks to the EOTC and its contribution of $335,000, another $25,000 from Garfield County Commissioners, and ultimately probably several $100,000 of additional contribution out of RAFTA's coffers to make it happen. We're providing free services around Glenwood Springs. We have 3 different shuttles that operate on different parts of town and on different sides of the river, and we're also providing free service in the I-70 corridor from as far away as Parachute to Glenwood Springs, bringing people in on exit 116, dropping them off in front of the Hotel Colorado and allowing them to walk across the pedestrian bridge. Wish I could flash a picture up on the screen that I took yesterday or day before of 3 or 4 bus loads with close to 200 passengers getting off at one time and crossing across that pedestrian bridge, where when they get on the other side, they'll hop on shuttles at the Amtrak station that take them further south in Glenwood Springs or up to the BRT station on 27th Street. We provided on all of these services about 80,000 rides from August 14 to August 31st. Comparable services for that time frame, if we had not been providing these services, would have been maybe 10 to 12,000 rides. So we saw about a 70,000 ride increase during the bridge closure. And we've been getting favorable posts on Facebook. We have been getting lots of accolades and compliments and expressions of appreciation from commuters, many of whom have never used transit before and who like it. And I'm going to be appearing before the Garfield County Commissioners on Monday and ask them to provide some funding to continue a higher level of service beyond the bridge opening, which is scheduled for about, the 20th or so of November. So again, thank you for your contribution that made this possible. The RAFTA board is supporting the effort and said, do whatever it takes to make this situation more bearable for all the people that have to experience that daily congestion.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. And compliments to the entire RAFTA team from top to bottom for getting the job done. It's remarkable. So, Steve?
A question for you, Dan.
Sure.
The one thing that I've heard that is not working well is the traffic backed up towards South Canyon on I-70 and the RAFTA buses being in the line to exit. Is there any way that the RAFTA buses could bypass the long line and then cut in right at the West Glenwood exit?
Well, Steve, the way that it works is that there's really only one way into town, that's exit 114. And 2 or 3 miles back to the west of exit 114, anybody exiting off of 114 need to get in the right lane. That frees up the left lane, and all of the over-the-road coaches and buses that RAFTA has carrying passengers from the I-70 corridor west communities get in the left lane and bypass exit 114 and get off at 116, where there's virtually no traffic, and then go over to the Hotel Colorado, drop those passengers. They walk across the pedestrian bridge, either go to work downtown or hop on the Amtrak shuttle and go further south. And they do the reverse in the evening. The only difference is that we do have a pickup down at exit 114 in the evenings, and those buses on their outbound trip will go by that, go through the roundabout and out on 114. But typically there's not a lot of backup on 6 and 24.
Okay, so they're allowed to exit at the main Glenwood exit?
Yes.
And not have to get off at 114?
Yes, if we were having to get in 114 traffic, then it would not be workable. And the other thing that I have to give some props to CDOT for is that they restriped Highway 82 from Buffalo Valley to Walmart, essentially, at that light at 32nd Street, so that we could get a slip lane to bypass the congestion backs up from that signal in the evenings. They did that within 5 days of the bridge closure. Overnight it appeared, and the passengers on the bus literally are yelling and screaming every day as they pass all that traffic. So
I was on a bus where the driver actually had his right wheels clear off on the dirt part of the shoulder.
Yeah, it's a little tight in there. We're going to see if CDOT will let us keep that at least maybe a half mile, a quarter mile back, but it's made a tremendous difference in terms of our ability to stay on schedule. Prior to that, on the Tuesday and Wednesday, I heard reports of, because we were stuck in that congestion and was almost back to the CMC turnoff, Spring Valley campus, that somebody said on the bus for 38 changes of the signal at Buffalo Valley before they got past it, they had a 2-hour trip.
How many? 38?
38 changes.
But when it gets to 40, we're gonna take care of this.
Story that a lady got off the bus, demanded.
That's a line we won't cross.
Excuse me. There was another lady who demanded to be let off the bus at Buffalo Valley. She walked down the Rio Grande Trail, stopped at Subway at the Roaring Fork Marketplace, walked over to the BRT station, and got there before her friend who was on the bus. So that's how bad it was.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Steve. Anything else? Good.
That's good. Thank you.
Good. All right, John. Done?
Next meeting, October 19th, in this room, county chair and host. Thank you all.
Good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your comments. Thanks. Thank you, Grassroots.